All right, I'm going to say that we are live on Facebook, and I want to welcome people who are watching us tonight. My name is Peter Franzen. I took a shower, I got a fresh shirt on, I shaved. It must be Tuesday. It's the only way I know when I'm here with you live on Facebook. I wish I could see you, but I know that you're out there. Welcome, live from the kitchen. This is hashtag Scene Cares. It's our weekly Facebook Live series from the Children's Education Alliance of Missouri. I'll be watching here in my phone as soon as I get the notification that we're live, and I'll be looking in the comments section so you can join the conversation or just say hi. And we'll be sharing any resources that come up along the way. So I want to thank you for joining us. Tonight, we're going to talk to the founders and leaders of a new charter school in St. Louis called Kairos Academies. The learning model that's used at Kairos helped their students transition smoothly to schooling from home during the pandemic. First, though, I want to talk about what's really going on for a minute. First it was a global pandemic like we haven't seen in a century. And now, following another case of excessive use of force of an unarmed Black man in Minneapolis, George Floyd, that resulted in his death, now we're faced with a national crisis of another sort. And in cities across the country and even around the world, we're seeing citizens protesting the racially biased use of force by police. And following those protests, in some places, we've also seen a second phenomenon of violence and destruction. What's clear to me from all this is that we have a lot of work to do and a lot of bridges to build. And I hope everyone can find a way to be a part of a path forward in our country. I joined a protest in downtown St. Louis yesterday afternoon because I know that change requires critical mass and that protesting is a part of the policy change process. Honestly, I struggled with writing my opening tonight because I know that racism in America needs to be addressed. We all have a part to play in constructive solutions to this deep and painful reality. In everything we do here at SEAM, we engage with parents and educators and school leaders who see the inherent unfairness of children being forced into an education that fails to meet the needs of that particular child. The impact of failing schools or schools that just aren't a good fit are long lasting and feed into the even bigger problems that we face today. So it was with that in mind that I decided that I should stick with the guests we originally invited, because the school they founded and are leading is showing great promise for the young people who attend it. When schools were closed as the pandemic arrived and took hold in our country, the students at Kairos Academy made a much smoother transition to learning at home. And we're going to find out about that model for education tonight and hear what the founders think about the school's future. So if you're with us, and I know there's a lot to pay attention to right now, but if you're with us here, I urge you to join the conversation. I want to know what you're saying and thinking, and bring on your questions for the guys. And we want to see them in the comments. So thanks again if you're watching. By now, many people understand that charter schools are publicly funded independent public schools that are currently only able to operate in the city of St. Louis and within the Kansas City Public School District, if you're in Missouri. And charter public schools are governed by a board, and they have to adhere to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education policies and testing. Now, charter schools have staunch supporters who see them as invaluable bastions of choice for families who may not have other options, maybe because they can't afford to move to a better school district, or maybe because they can't afford to pay the private school tuition that they might otherwise pay. And charter school detractors are generally supporters of the status quo who only see charters as taking away money from public school districts. What's clear, though, is that when something is working, we need to understand why it's working, where others have failed. Our guests tonight are two guys with a passion for education. Both of them participated in Teach for America here in St. Louis, in the St. Louis area. And following that experience and some additional time in the classroom in the years that followed, they decided they had something to offer the education landscape here. They started planning for their dream school, and eventually, and I'm cutting out a lot of details, eventually they successfully founded Kairos Academies in the Marine Villa neighborhood, not far from Cherokee and Jefferson, if you know where that is. Gavin Schifries, he graduated magna cum laude from Yale University with honors for his thesis work in educational innovation. And Gavin has taught in New Haven, in Israel, in St. Louis, and he's worked to advance educational equity at Students First and the Louisiana Department of Education. And Gavin holds his master's in education. And his partner, Jack Cruson, at Kairos, graduated from Washington University in St. Louis, where he studied political and racial inequity in the city. And Jack has taught in Hong Kong, and he's held leadership roles at Normandy High School and supported high quality instruction through the St. Louis Teacher Residency. And he holds his master's degree in education. So welcome, guys. Hi, Jack. Hi, Gavin.
Hey.
So I know, right? That was a lot. Hey, so again, to our audience, as we start our questions and as they come to mind as we start our conversation, please put them in the comments section. I'm watching for them as soon as I can get my phone to work for me, and give me a heads up here on the old Facebook live feed with a 20-second delay. I can do this. So, Gavin, Jack, I very much want to talk about how your students manage to do so well during the school closures. But first, let's get a handle on Kairos Academies so our audience can understand what you guys are doing. And I'd like to just start with the basics. It seems to me that Kairos is your attempt to create a school for the 21st century. Can you guys describe the features of 20th century education that you think are failing us? What are industrial age values? What is inauthentic learning? And why does it matter if there's no room for passion? I open that to either of you guys.
Yeah, I think I can start that out. I think it's prescient to start the conversation with what's the problem that we're trying to solve, right? So when Gavin and I were in the classroom, we saw a system of education that was clearly founded on two cardinal principles or virtues, and they weren't, they weren't things that you hope for in your child's school. If you were an alien dropped into the schools in which we taught, and you were asked, what do these places care about, right? You'd be forced to say control and compliance. And after visiting, school after school after school around the country, after that experience, we came to realize that, this was true not just in the schools where we taught, but it was a feature of our educational system. Kids were told every second of every day where to be, who to work with, whether they could talk, if they could use the restroom, all the way up through their senior year of high school. And this led to a big problem when those kids got to college. And, for the first time, they were off this precipice of choice where they had to decide, how to manage their own time in a meaningful way, how to decide what they wanted and what they wanted to go after. And that was a real issue. And this comes as you stated, from industrial era values imbued in our education system during the progressive school era in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. I won't talk too much in detail about this, but we can dive deeper if you want. The history is pretty ugly, right? But there is a reason that the schools of today, right, you still move from class to class on a factory bell schedule. There's a reason that we are departmentalized by, we're going to learn English here. We're going to group kids in batches, and we're going to process them through English, through science, through social studies, through math. When every good educator knows that all good learning is interdisciplinary in some way, and all application of good learning is interdisciplinary in some way.
And the kids don't all learn at the same rate, at the same time, because we sort them by age. Not necessarily anything else, just kind of assume that that's the way we should do it.
Right, and to crib a little bit from Ken Robinson on that, it's as if we think that the thing that kids have most in common is their date of manufacture, right? And so we push 30 kids at a time through a single classroom, through a single curriculum, a standardized curriculum, with this false premise that it's right for all of them at the same time at the same pace. And it's designed to create a standardized student who works really well on the factory floor, right? If one person is out for that day, well, Jack is an interchangeable widget. You can pop me right in, and I can serve that purpose. And I think that is ethically wrong, right? So we're preparing people to be followers, not leaders. But it is also not really practical anymore because the kinds of skills we're preparing kids for, the kind of environments we're preparing them for, are going away, right? So it's just true that anything that relies on a standardized skill set is a rote kind of memorization task or repeated process. Computers are doing those things. Robots are doing those things. And that's a losing battle because, robots don't need health insurance. Robots don't talk back. Robots don't need a salary. And that creates this really scary picture. Well, it's what are our kids going to do when they grow up? And our thought is that, there are things robots and computers aren't good at. Creativity, critical thinking, working in relationship with other people. And those are the kind of deeper cognitive skills that we want to focus on at Kairos, not just because they are the things that make you a human being, but also because, those skills are what the jobs of tomorrow are going to require of you. Because they're the only kind of jobs that are going to be around.
So, in a minute, just for the audience sake, Jack and Gavin are going to show us some of the online features of their school. So we're going to get an actual look at it. But so Jack, if that's the 20th century model that we don't want, can you guys tell us about the Kairos model? What are the key things about the Kairos model that our audience really needs to understand? And what is it about this that's a 21st century model? What are you guys trying to do?
Sure, I can, while Jack pulls up the online platform, walk you through that. I think most people know what a 21st century job and life experience requires because they live it every day. So a 21st century information age professional career or a liberal arts college experience requires you to manage your own time, to set your own schedule, keep task lists and to-do lists, to work on projects that you design that are meaningful to you. They're not a bunch of handouts and worksheets that somebody gives you. Like Jack mentioned, they're often interdisciplinary. They almost always are collaborative with other people. And they have you working in a flexible environment. So the idea of sitting in a factory line or working in a cubicle is a thing of the past. And it was this weird industrial era time when that happened, because before then it wasn't like that. It's just not how human beings function. And so when you learn at Kairos, you are learning in a flexible environment. You are self-directing. That's kind of our catch-all term when kids make ownership decisions over their schedule, their curricular plan, whom, when, where, and how they do their work. And you are working on what we call, and what Jack will about to show you, a personalized learning curriculum. And so, like Jack mentioned, not every kid learns in the same way. They don't all learn at the same pace. They don't all have the same interests. And by using a really low student-to-teacher ratio and by leveraging technology creatively, we can actually give kids material at their level and let them self-direct through it in a personalized way. And so kids at Kairos work not just on hands-on projects that are meaningful in a flexible environment, but they do it through a personalized learning curriculum that adjusts to meet their needs and strengths.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. I want to thank people who are tuning in. We do have a Facebook audience, and I want to thank you guys. I see you here on my phone. So if you have questions, I want to get it to the guys. I have some more questions for them. They're going to show us some stuff in here. So yeah, well, this is a little bit, Gavin, what you just said, I think, for some parents might freak them out a little bit. Like, that sounds really like loosey-goosey. I know it's not, because I know about Kairos, but why is it not? I mean, there's
let me explain a little
technology. Go ahead.
Yeah, so most people in the public school system have heard of IEPs, right? An IEP is an individualized education plan that's given to students who have or diagnosed with disabilities. And in an IEP, you get a personalized plan that helps you work in places that you work best with. So those are called resource rooms often. It gives you a modified curriculum that gives supports that help you achieve and reach the material. You get a case manager who advocates on your behalf to other teachers, who monitors your progress, who checks in with you, who talks to parents. Basically, you have an individualized plan for your own success. At Kairos, we do that with every student. So we don't actually give every kid an IEP technically, but every kid gets a coach. And the coach is not an academic tutor. It is an executive functioning coach, which is just a jargony way of saying it's an adult. It's like your parent in the building, right? So you meet with your coach and the coach says, okay, you're struggling with math, just like your mom would, right? She doesn't teach you the math. She says, okay, let's figure out how to set up a meeting with the teacher to get office hour support. How do we backwards plan studying for this math test 2 weeks out by chunking what your review material is? Where are you studying best, right? You should study with your friends. You want to study alone in a conference room. Do you listen to music when you study? The coach helps you think through all of these real world decisions and supports you as you make those choices. And the coach also sets up in conjunction with your parents, whom they talk to every single week, and in conjunction with you when we meet 3 times a week. The coach sets up a personalized plan for you every day, every week, that over time, you as a student take more ownership of. So on day one, I'm the coach, I'm owning your schedule, and it's personalized to you, but I'm deciding those choices. And then as you show me, you can be responsible and productive on your own. You gradually take bits and pieces of those decisions until you are a truly independent, self-directed learner. And that's why we transition from 6th grade to 12th grade in a smooth gradient along that, so that by the time kids step out of Kairos into college, they're already doing college, basically. They're already living that life. And so it's a super easy transition, whether it's college, whether it is a 21st century career. Those all require the same executive functioning skills. And that's what the coach works on with kids.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
add really quick, Peter, just
sure,
there's nothing new really. I mean, parents are like, I understand how it seems like a new kind of concept of education, and that can be scary for parents. But there's really nothing new about the idea of a one-on-one relationship with a tutor or an adult. It just used to be that, only the wealthiest among us could afford that kind of support for their children. And what we're trying to do is design a model that provides that level of intentional support and knowledge of the child to every student in our school in a free public school, right?
Now, I know we just spoke broadly or used it as an example. Is there room for an actual IEP for a child who's struggling at Kairos? Is that a thing?
100%. So about 17% of our students have IEPs. If you came to Kairos, would not know which those students are because they are 100% integrated into our model. Just like an IEP student has a case manager, the case manager is their coach. And so they are getting the same treatment, the same differentiated support that every student is, because we recognize that kids are idiosyncratic learners, and having a diagnosed disability is just one of many different ways you could need additional learning support or need modifications. Our neurodiverse learners, and that's what we call students with IEPs, our neurodiverse learners it's called the NAA MAP. It is the most rigorous respected growth assessment nationwide. On the NAA MAP, they grew faster than 95% of comparable peers across the country. That means when you compare where they came in to other kids who came in at that level, both with disabilities and without disabilities, our kids grew faster than 95% of them. And so we've been, I think, recognized by the state of Missouri as in the top tier of best special education programs in the state.
All right. So, Jack, this is not just like a highly organized trapper keeper with a bunch of paper in it. This is something that involves technology. Can you give us a look at the
absolutely.
platform, what the students see? We're going to let you take the screen there.
Digital Trapper Keeper is not a bad way to think about this, actually. So, what I'm showing you right now is the Summit Learning Platform. This platform was developed by Summit Public Schools. They're a group of 11 charter schools out in California and Washington that have pioneered parts of this approach around personalized learning. And they have what is sort of the best in class, both curriculum and platform that they share with select schools across the country. And we're the first school to bring it here to Missouri, to my knowledge, and definitely to St. Louis, because we're so aligned with them and how we think about personalized learning. But we think about Summit like we think about anything else, which is, we want to find the best resources that the internet has to offer, that the world has to offer, and put them in front of our kids. And this is one example of that. So we're looking right now at a student's year page. And this page charts out for a 6th grade student. This is a student in my pod who's okayed me sharing, and his parents have okayed me sharing his information here. And this is his year page. So you can see across the top, these are the months of our year. And you can see the subjects that the student is engaged in along the left side here. And let's zoom in on one just to make this a little less overwhelming. So let's zoom in on science, for example. So in science, like in every subject, a student's going to be engaged in projects at our school. Now, these projects are cognitively guided instruction, right? So they are not a lecture format or right and wrong answer stuff. That comes through the focus areas, which we'll talk about in a second. But projects are designed to engage those higher order cognitive skills that I was mentioning earlier that are so fundamental to a student's success in the 21st century. So one example is My Body Book. It's a project where students, they study the different bodily systems, respiratory system, right, cardiovascular system, whichever system they choose. And they do a deep dive into the cell, right, into the tissue that cell creates, into the organs involved in the system, and then finally the system as a whole and how it operates. And they build a book on that basis. And what a book means in this context can be different for each student. So we had students who coded in Scratch, right, an entire neurological system down from the neuron level with, an impulse, traveling down the axon terminal to another neuron, all the way out to a map of the brain. And they coded this in a visual coding software called Scratch. That's one example of completing the requirements of this project. Another is a physical hand-drawn book for some of our students who are more artistically inclined, right? There are lots of different ways to meet the challenge of an individual project, and students are synthesizing in those projects, they're creating, and they are presenting often, right? And so these kind of projects would capture some of the things you'd see in a traditional school. So if you're reading, a book like, The Color Purple, and you are working through to diagnose and understand the themes of that book, and then you want to write a persuasive essay about that, well, that is a project of a sort, right? So you're engaging your higher order cognitive capacities. It involves a discussion or cognitively guided instruction in class. That's where that kind of stuff lives. But in our school, for every subject, for every unit, essentially, a student is showing us what they know by completing a project like that. So that's that top line there. And you can see in every subject the different projects students have, right? So history without writing, agriculture and human development, these are all things they have tangible outputs or products. And then below that, you can see the real personalized learning component. These are modules that we call focus areas. And in a focus area, let's just take, for example, area and surface area. This is already green because it means that the student who I'm showing you this for has mastered this material. And in this is all of the right and wrong information you would need to know about area and surface area at a 6th grade level, right? So this is the lecture basically, but it is delivered to the student at their own pace, and they have to work their way through the material and go after and seek the information themselves. And so every one of these, go ahead.
Is this written or audio visual, or what is it?
It's a lot of different things. And I'll touch on how they learn that in just a second. They start out each one of these with a little diagnostic assessment. It's like, hey, what do you already know about this, right? And as you can see, this student got an 8 out of 9. They actually came in knowing quite a bit about area and surface area. And so that would tell you, where do I need to focus my efforts? Maybe you know a lot about finding the area of triangles and rectangles, but maybe you don't know a lot about objective 3, which is representing 3-dimensional figures using nets, right? So that would tell you and kind of guide you about where to study. But each one of these objectives has video resources, lecture note resources, these interactive tools called gizmos, which are basically computer models or simulations of real world ideas. They are ways for you to access that information. And often those resources are redundant, right? So that the student can choose the resource and the method that is right for them, be it auditory, be it visual, be it sort of more interactive to master this material. And they also have practice problems interspersed, right, to make sure that students are mastering those things as they go. Those practice problems are always graded by the computer. The feedback is always immediate for the student so that they don't build bad habits, right? And that is basically how they work through what would be the regular lecture portion of a class. But now every kid in a classroom could be on a different focus area, working on a different resource, working on what's right for them at the pace that's right for them. And they can pause and rewind and stop and ask questions when is right for them, instead of feeling like they're going to drag the class down for doing that, right? Or maybe they've already mastered what the rest of the class is working on, its area and surface area, and this student is ahead on something else. Well, they can do that, right? They can work at their own pace. And when they're done, let's say they work through all of these objectives and all the resources, right? They're going to take what we call content assessment. And that's a 10-question quiz. The student needs to get an 8 out of 10 to master the material and move on. It's a competency-based progression in that way, because we don't want students building skill gaps into their learning and then having those skill gaps come back to haunt them later, right? So 6 out of 10. Yeah, well, I mean, and me too, right? And like skill gaps are a very easy thing to avoid if we set the bar an 8 out of 10. Now, to do that, you have to do something a lot of educators are uncomfortable with, which is to say, there's no like single moment high stakes testing in this environment, right? So you take the content assessment, you get a 6 out of 10. That is just information. Like all failure, right? That is just information. That tells you, oh, I knew this and I didn't know that, and let me go back and study that, and I can retake this as many times as I need to. Different questions, same content, and master it and move forward. And so if you go back to this page and we zoom out and we look at all of these focus areas here, let's just take, science, for instance. These power focus areas, these are the focus areas that every student needs to master during their 6th grade year, right? That's part of your grade, that's a requirement. And then they work into additional focus areas, which you can think about as extra credit, sort of. They're the difference between an A- and an A+. And then challenge focus areas, these are just for fun, right? And these extend and accelerate student learning in a way that allows students to like pick and choose. Maybe they love science and they want to dig deeper in science, right, than they do in ancient civ. And this is what allows for some of that personalization. It's also worth saying that the 7th grade curriculum follows a similar structure to this, and the 8th grade and the 9th grade. And so if a student's working ahead, they can start working on 7th grade material, right? It is entirely at the student's pace to learn that right and wrong information stuff. And then they apply those skills, again, to make something real in their project-based learning.
Very cool. Now, Jack, we shared this in the comments section. Nick shared that so people can take a look at it. We're almost out of time. What, and maybe it's inherent here in this, but Gavin or Jack, how then, we have this coronavirus show up, bam, the schools are closed. And maybe this is evident in everything that you've just told us, but then what was that transition like? Clearly it had to be a little bit easier. And of course, the whole purpose of tonight's talk is that it was, it did work for you. Can you guys just talk a little bit about what happened in the last few minutes here?
Yeah, so really high level, with everything Jack just laid out, let us transition seamlessly to remote learning because kids already were using technology. The idea is that kids today are working like a 21st century professional. They are remote, effectively, remote teleworkers or consultants. It's just like their parents are. And so the people, you were trying to think big picture, the kids who are going to be successful there are the kids who are used to working in real world environments. And so our students have been using technology in the same way adults do. They've already been taking notes on Google Docs. They've already been doing video learning. Our kids are used to setting their own goals and managing their own projects over multiple weeks without a lot of teacher support and attention, right? Getting that independence. They're used to avoiding distractions in their environment and deciding when and where and how they work. And they have that really tight coaching support network. And so their coach is like an adult accountability factor. So the coach can both communicate with parents really easily because that relationship is built. And, if you told any 6th grader that they could skip school, which is really what you can do with remote school, right? One way or another, you can skip it. And who wouldn't want to do that? And the only reason you don't do that is because your mom or dad is going to be knocking on your door being like, get to school, what are you doing? And the coach is that mom or dad, right? The coach is the adult figure you don't want to disappoint, who will call you or show up at your house and, you know, give you hell for not doing the right thing and be your little Jiminy Cricket. And that is where the leverage of, like Jack said, it's not a new thing. We're not that innovative. The idea of having an adult presence in your life who can hold you accountable. We've just set up a structure which gives adults the intentionality and the time to do that. So the transition was seamless, I think, because of what we did in school. And what we're trying to do now is figure out what there are actually some benefits to doing remote learning that some of our kids are doing even better in some areas, because especially if you have an IEP and you have social anxiety, or if you're a low performer and you're easily distracted, those kids are actually performing better. And so how do we leverage the idea of, you know, in a workplace or in college, you're always gonna be able to go isolate yourself. You can go to your dorm room and do your homework alone. That's what our kids are doing right now. How do we create an opportunity for them to do that during the normal school year so that they can continue to grow in as fast as they can and in a way that works best for them?
What are you guys anticipating for the fall? I mean, I know no one can predict the future. We don't know if there's going to be a second wave or whatever.
Yeah, we are scenario planning. Basically, I think the only thing we've learned from this, like as an organization, is you need to have really strong foundations, and that we're doubling down on the fundamentals, and then you need to be really agile and able to move in different directions quickly. And I think that's where we were, why we transitioned seamlessly. And we don't want to have to start thinking in August about what's going to happen. So I can tell you we have 10 different scenarios based on infection rate, based on health plans, based on all sorts of variables. And we're just, you know, what we have now is time. So we've planned ahead, and then we're just going to call the play. I think most likely it'll be either all in person and we rented additional space to social distance in our building, or we'll do a blended mix to go A week, B week. So half the school 1 week, we disinfect and deep clean, and the other half the next week, and we do blended online the other times.
Are you guys enrolling for the fall?
Yeah, we are. We're still enrolling for our 6th and our 7th grade class. 7th grade class has just like 1 or 2 spots left. So if you're interested, let us know. 6th grade class, I think we have about 10. So the time is now if you're interested in learning more about this. We're also offering a summer school program for those incoming students. And you can learn more information about that on the website.
Did we cover that? Kairos is 6 through...
So we're growing 6 through 12. Right now, we're just 6th and 7th. But a number of our students have entered our 6th grade after skipping a year. And so if you're a parent who feels like your child might be successful in a personalized and differentiated environment, we've had a number of kids who have been really successful, even though they are technically a year younger than an average 6th grader.
Yeah, the concept is basically, you know, the concept of a grade level means less to a school that personalizes learning to meet your individual needs. So wherever you come into us, we're gonna serve your needs. And you know, there are 7th graders who are ready for 4th grade math, and there are 6th graders who are ready for 12th grade math. And across that entire spectrum, we can adjust to meet their needs. And you know, that's true if a student is technically coming into us as a 5th grader or a 6th grader. It doesn't matter. We can meet those needs.
And if you follow this to its logical conclusion, by the time you guys have high schoolers, I guess you're fully expecting that you're going to have students who complete an associate's degree before they finish high school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're looking at partnering with local universities and remote schools to expand and extend and enrich learning. And we do that that's a college thing right now, but we have kids on Coursera taking college courses through independent studies right now. We have Yale Open courses, we have edX. So basically, we are a learning hub, right? And our job is never to get in the way of student learning. And so we're there to serve, and we adjust it based on what the kids need. That's what we believe.
Very cool. All right. Well, listen, you guys, we're out of time, but I appreciate you both being here. And we had a lot of great conversation. I think I got the questions. There's some enthusiasm there. And Nick did put in contact information and how to reach guys at Kairos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, strange times we're in on all fronts. I wish you guys a lot of luck with the next school year. And I want to thank people for tuning in. So join us next week. We're going to have a crazy conversation, not crazy, awesome conversation with these two guys Jeremy Newlick and Elliot Frick from Big Wide Sky. They are futurists. And so we're going to learn a little bit about futures thinking. And, you know, as somebody once said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And, you know, that's true. So we're going to find out about futures thinking and how to plan for the future. So Jack and Gavin, I want to thank you guys. And I want to thank people who are tuning in. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you for organizing this. And if anyone is watching, all of our information is on the website. So you can go there and enroll and learn more.
Perfect. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.